Would you attribute that success to luck, or would you attribute it to hard work and dedication?
So I've thought about this a lot, and one day, just watching one of your videos, I muttered under my breath, it's like, luck will bite you in the butt.
What is up, fence fam? Joe Everest, your fence expert. We've got Beau Butler from Front Range Fence, and he has a heck of a fence story. Beau, we just got done recording it, talking about it. I think my 3 key takeaways are talking about when to scale, key hires when you're scaling, and then we had a really interesting discussion at the end of it about how luck can bite you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without further ado, let's get into Beau's story. Well, Beau, first and foremost, I appreciate you taking time to sit down and share your story with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and who your company is?
Yep, so my name is Beau Butler. Like I said, started this about 6 years ago, just me, by myself. Ran it like that for about 2 years, about a year and a half, 2 years. And
okay.
Slowly started hiring on some of my really good friends that I've had for a long time,
Sure.
just kind of help that you knew would be there when you needed them. And
yeah.
If you had to slow, just easier to work with flexibilities of schedule as you're starting.
Sure.
And, eventually just kind of grew from there, bringing a couple people on a year.
Very good. So that's an interesting conversation to have. First and foremost is there's kind of mixed feelings on bringing friends and family into the business.
Yeah.
And as the son of a business owner, I really am glad my dad didn't have that policy of not bringing in family. But where do you think you sit? I mean, obviously it's pretty obvious where you sit on the friends and family conversation in business. Do you feel like that served you well? I mean, bringing on our friends.
I think it's both. I mean, I think in starting and kind of getting up and going, I think it really kind of helps with that because you got somebody kind of dependable.
Yeah.
Long term, if you don't structure it correctly and communicate efficiently, I think it actually is a detriment to the company, especially in like disciplinary action.
Yeah.
That gets kind of hard, and after so many years, somebody feels like they're above somebody. You get kind of hierarchy issues. But you get that in every company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, I think with family, at least you're more obligated to like them afterwards. And friendships, I think you got to work harder to make sure that they stick. Yeah, you still got to see family at Christmas and that sort of thing. So that could get a little tense, maybe. But yeah, I think that's worth noting though that I'm kind of the same. Like I'm willing to consider bringing on friends and family because ultimately you have some built-in trust on day one. Yeah.
I mean, and their track record just by being friends or being family with them for so long. But you're right in that I think you have to be very clear in how you structure it. So in my story, I worked for my dad since I was a kid, and I almost felt like, and of course, this is the kid's perspective, but I really felt like I had it worse than everybody else because my dad I think he felt like he had to go out of his way to show that he wasn't giving me favoritism, which ultimately led to harsher interactions maybe. But then on the other side, all the team members, they just felt that I was getting favoritism, so I was getting it from both ends, right? That I was catching flack from my dad a little aggressively because he was trying to prove a point that there wasn't favoritism, but then also the guys just assumed that there was. So, do you think you see that with them being friends versus family? Do you think that there's that?
I mean, we see it every day. There's always, especially when you know somebody really well.
Sure.
You can tell, even around here, kind of working with you guys, you can tell when you're talking to somebody and there's a tension with somebody else, and you got to make sure you talk to that person, kind of get them involved, because you can definitely see, you can get a hierarchy, favorites.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
with friends, they're more likely to kind of let that stuff simmer and not say anything for a while and let it build and build and build. So
absolutely,
communication's really been really important. Not that we have it totally figured out.
Sure. No, I mean, well, and that's probably goes to a bigger conversation that we've talked about before, is that I'm a firm believer that no one actually has anything figured out, that everyone's constantly in a stage of figuring it out, whatever it is. I think your point's fair, though, that you're going to see that whether or not, I think you're going to see that with any team members, whether or not they're friends or family or otherwise or not. But it does add just another layer of complexity to it, and we're seeing that now with bringing my daughter on into e-commerce that now I see it from my dad's perspective too. And anyway, it's a different thing.
I think if you can work through it, though, it brings a higher level to the company.
Sure.
You know, you can build something to 20 million. It's better to say, you know, we built this as friends. We've got through this. Not that you can't bring people on and making new friends, but I think it's a little more meaningful if you bring it up with family or friendships, you know.
Yeah, you can. It feels a little bit different when you look back at it. That, like you said, we built this, sort of thing. One thing we had talked about previously off camera was the difficulties you guys face in bringing, I don't want to say outsiders, but bringing on new team members. Can you talk about that dynamic a little bit when you've got a circle of friends, but you try to bring on team members from outside that circle?
Yep, and that might even be harder than working with friends sometimes because, you know, every group has a vibe. They have a culture. They have there's a sense around people, a group of friends, the way they communicate, the way they talk. It's hard to bring an outsider into that. Even if they're picking at them with fun, with teasing and stuff, it's hard for them to feel welcomed into that. Some people jump right into it, but a lot of kind of quieter, more mellow people, it can be really hard to get into that. And you have to check your friends and people like, hey, I feel like you're going a little too far, a little too much teasing. Make sure we're involving them more. It gets harder to kind of bring people into that group when you are a tight niche group.
Absolutely. Well, and you probably would see that even growing from a small company to a medium company, because like to your point earlier, you guys have been through some stuff, right? You've crossed some hurdles, you've overcome obstacles, and then maybe there's a sense of the new team member hasn't necessarily been through that, right? Say, well, listen, we were here from before. So, which I think it's a real problem, right? Because you need to scale, you need to grow, and that's one of those things to figure out is how do we bring on new team members? We spent a good amount of time talking about that last night, and I don't know that there's a good resolution to it, but
you just kind of work, you learn as you go, and luckily these days you have people like yourself to kind of talk to, and all the video and content from all these companies and see, 15 years ago, you would never know what the culture was like at other companies. You're assuming and doing the best you can, where you really have structures and guidelines and maps to follow now to really kind of pick what you want. You can also go through the companies that are out there, like, I want this culture, I don't want that culture.
Right.
And you can kind of pick and choose where you want to go.
I think that's a fair point. I think that's an excellent point, is that I think those of us with social platforms and that produce content like this, I think that's really all we're trying to do, is give insight into how we do it so that someone else can see that and try to apply it to their particular situation. Sometimes in the comments, and listen, I absolutely understand that the channel title is The Fence Expert, but I think some people come at it from a perspective of, well, who are you to tell me what to do? Like, no, I agree. I'm simply giving you my perspective and hoping that you apply it as useful into your perspective.
Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit. So let's talk about why a fence company? Why did you come from a fencing background?
No, we came from a tower industry. Me and a couple of the friends, we used to build towers for Sprint and Verizon and T-Mobile. And in that industry, we learned a wide range of skill sets. Not quite a master of any, but
but proficient.
in all: electrician, plumbing, grounding, tower erection, and concrete forming. We've done helicopter drops on top of mountaintops, getting equipment up. Like, just a wide array of stuff we've been, had the pleasure of doing. And, so got out of that once I started having kids. I was realizing on the road 5 days a week, it is kind of hard for a family life.
Sure.
So got out of that, got into some, something real quick and easy, as mowing lawns and landscaping.
Yeah.
Did that for a little bit. I can't remember landed a fence job here or there with a buddy, or I think it might have helped somebody with the fence.
Sure.
Did one there, and I was like, we were using Thumbtack at the time.
Okay, yeah.
It was just the easiest thing. You can pick and choose what you want to bid on. Like,
absolutely.
Landscape and bid on a fence. Oh, we got a fence job, and it just kind of clicked. Like, it went really smooth, and I was really good at it. And the satisfaction after putting a fence in, you get the fresh cedar smell, and the before and after, there's something about it.
Well, and you can step back and appreciate your work.
Yeah.
I mean, when it's done.
Yep. And kind of from there on, we just kind of went with that. We've gone through phases where we try to be more than just fencing, and we've changed our name a couple times over the years to not just represent fencing. We do tree removal and kind of all sorts of stuff. But then you kind of get into that jack of all trades, but not a master of one, and run into marketing issues like, well, how do we get more fence jobs? Because that was always kind of what we were directed to.
Okay.
It's like, well, we should probably have fence in our name.
Right.
You know, and if we have fence in our name, we're not going to be bidding on retaining wall jobs or landscaping jobs. So it's just kind of a focus change. Like, you know, we're just going to say, I'm going to have to say no to tree trimming and landscaping, and we're just going down fencing, and it's been a lot easier since then.
Well, and there's something to be said about being able to focus, to allowing yourself to focus on, you know, one particular passion or one particular niche. We talked about a little bit of that before about, you know, and focusing even more still, you know, from fence to within fence, focusing a little bit there. But, you know, it sounds counterintuitive, but it actually gives you more freedom by kind of narrowing down your focus, I would think. Yeah.
Narrowing down into one niche, but expanding in that niche.
Yeah. Absolutely. So a couple years by yourself, owner-operator, what was the moment that you knew it was the right time to start growing? So 2 years by yourself, what was that moment at the end of the 2 years or that time frame?
You just couldn't get the, you know, running into scheduling issues.
Okay.
You know, just super booked up, and just, you know, eventually, because we've always spent money on ads. We've done a lot of referral stuff, but we've always had an ad budget, and we always run to the point where you're turning off the ads because you just can't land it. You know, we're 4 weeks out, 5 weeks out, and you're that far out. One guy, you have any issues, 3-day rainstorm, you know, a truck breaking down. It's just a domino effect through the schedule.
Or the customer reschedules.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what we've run into lately is we do a lot around pools. Well, pools aren't getting installed as quickly right now. So any sort of hiccup probably makes that situation worse. So when you hired on team members, you hired them on as helpers, as hands sort of thing. What was your first hire outside the crew? What team member came next? So a helper, maybe two. But what was the first hire outside of the direct install team?
Really would be our salesman, David.
Okay.
I've found it hard to get out of the field.
Sure.
I've been pretty good about the last year and a half or so, but I still do. I enjoy being out in the field with the guys. You know,
of course.
I'm an installer. I've always found it hard running a business. Everybody talks about, you know, you've got those craftsmen that just are really good at what they do.
Absolutely.
And then you have a businessman, and I find myself in the middle, you know, fighting because I want to be both directions. You know, if I'm in the office too long, I get really upset. You know, out in the field too long. You know, I like doing both of them.
Sure.
So it's been a real challenge, kind of, to figure that out and really try to focus more on the interiors, on the inside of the company stuff. Yeah. So even when we had 5 guys, I was still doing the operations stuff and sales. Okay. But I was on a crew.
So how does that balance look like? And what does the balance look like for you in that situation between, because I think a lot of the folks we talk to have a hard time with that transition.
Yeah.
Getting off of the crew, even if part-time, and moving into the office. How did that transition look like for you?
It was a lot of in the truck, mainly driving between jobs, doing a quote, pulling over. Okay. Writing up that quote right away just because I knew I didn't have time that night.
Sure.
So I'd pull, you know, try to schedule the job walks enough, and with having enough time, you pull over, write the estimate real quick in the truck, go to the next one, and still kind of bouncing between jobs as we needed, going to get materials. And then slowly just, you know, realize that maybe I could just have the crew lead take the truck and go get materials and leave the helper on site. And then, you know, and that just takes one thing off of me.
Sure.
The biggest thing is when we were able to move down to out of our home facility that we had, and we got down into a small shop and a warehouse.
When did you know the time was right for that move? That's a pretty big step, moving from a home operation to a business location operation.
It was. You know, it was a few things that just kind of landed at the right place. We had a really big job that turned out pretty good, so we came out with a decent amount of profit on a job that we had bid very well. Another one is, you know, after COVID happened, they were giving out the EDIL loans.
Sure.
So, you know, we applied for them, and, you know, in the Paycheck Protection Program, and it gave us kind of that buffer, like maybe we can expand out and move into a shop.
Yeah. Which is exactly what they were to be used for.
Yep, and that's what we did. And I think internally I feel a little uncomfortable about it sometimes. I feel like I cheated.
Well, but no,
it's just, we could have taken a loan from any bank.
That's right.
But it was the next step to get us from out of where we were. And then from there, it's just, it paid for itself twofold.
Yeah. It's funny when I look into situations like, for us, it's buying equipment. There's always a hesitation on, can we justify it? Can we not? But it always seems like once you have it, you use it more than you think.
Yeah.
And the business location is probably the same, where you probably end up utilizing it more than you'd anticipated.
Yep. And it's just it's always a game in your head. Like, could we have probably afforded the shop before that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But just having the cushion on top of that kind of, maybe we can take the risk.
Sure.
And we've taken that into a lot of things and doing a lot more custom work. It's just taking the risk,
Yeah. So
you figure it out as long as you work through it with the customers, with whatever you're trying. It will turn out positive at the end.
That's the thing is on the subject of risk. I think calculated risk is great. I think it stretches you mentally. It stretches your comfort level a little bit. But I think people have a hard time talking about risk because they're afraid that there's a misunderstanding of we're saying people should take risk all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Like, there's a time and place for it. Like, I enjoy being conservative financially and not taking massive risk, but I also kind of pride myself in seeing an opportunity too.
Yeah.
So I guess the question there is, how do you weigh? Like, when do you know the calculated risk is worth it? Is it a feeling or?
It's more of a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there's any formula to it. Sometimes when you just, you get that feeling.
Sure.
And, as an owner, and you make the rules.
Sure.
You want to go for it? We're going to go for it. And you try to get that, and you get the guys to see it, and hope you can get some people to help you along the way.
Get them to see the vision, buy into it, and understand it.
Yep.
And that's a double-edged sword too. Like you said, as a business owner, you get to choose the direction, but there's that little voice in the back of your mind that's like, maybe you should have gone the other way.
Yep.
But I think at some point you learn to exercise that muscle, that judgment muscle, and train it a little bit on, okay, well, that didn't go exactly as planned, but you learn to listen to it, I guess, is the point.
Yeah. You try not to look back at what it could have been.
Sure.
Because you have no idea what that other route could have taken you to.
That's the hardest part. Right, is looking back. So say you hit a pothole, you hit a down spot, whatever it is. I think it's easy to look back and go, man, it would have gone so much better if I chose, because you're optimistic too.
Yeah.
Right. You said, see, if I'd gone this other way, everything would have gone perfectly. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe the repercussions would have been worse. So you had some helpers. You brought on a sales, inside outside sales. What were the next few hires after that?
Our sales guy was the last hire. We've exchanged a few laborers.
Okay.
Just through people leaving, bringing people in.
Gotcha.
But our last increased role was a sales guy, and that was game changing to the company. You look back, and that is one where, man, I should have done that years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because it frees you up.
Yeah.
Right. And now you have a team member who their whole goal and passion is bringing in sales for the company, which is oxygen to the company.
Yeah.
So, but one thing you shared with me also is that you also have some support staff. Is that right? So, like a fabricator, that sort of thing. I'm interested in this conversation too, because a lot of times I think a lot of people think they have to have a larger company to justify fabrication and project support, that sort of thing. What did it look like for you to bring, or not to bring that position on, but maybe reposition that individual into that position?
We would order gates from suppliers, have some issues with them.
Sure.
Just the sheer cost of them sometimes.
Yeah.
You look at the steel cost, you order some top rail, and it's like, well, that gate's made out of top rail. I can make that for a lot cheaper.
I'm going to add the top rail, the wire, and the fittings. Where's the rest?
And like I said, we've always very comfortable, most of us, with expanding, and we can do a lot of different things.
Sure.
So try doing some man gates, and obviously you get into a Maristar, you got to weld your gate ends on. So I think it started with that. Then we started making some chain link gates, and the big one that really kind of set us over was a 25-foot cantilever gate that we had ordered, and the welds on it were horrendous.
Really?
From a company that we got it from. So much that we installed it and the customer denied it and said, my 7-year-old kid could weld a better gate than this.
Yeah.
And we had never really looked at it too much. It's all galvanized.
Sure.
We just didn't really think about it too much. It went from the shop, from on the truck to the shop, and then on the truck to the job site, and never really inspected it. Anyway, so we took that gate back and said, this customer's rejecting this, and really, when you look at it, it is poor quality. They agreed to make us a new gate. 3 weeks later, we get our gate, and they messed up the measurement and made it 3 feet shorter. So that gate didn't work.
That's not going to work?
So we were going to get comped another gate, and I was like, talk to my guy, who's on a crew, Jake, who's our fabricator. He's like, why don't we just try to make one?
Yeah.
So I reached out to our supplier. I'm like, look, I need you to comp me half this gate back, and if you could just give us the materials for a new gate.
Yeah.
And they agreed to that. So
it's a good compromise.
Yep. So they gave us 50% back on the cost of the gate, and then gave us just the materials to make the gate ourselves.
Very good.
And that was our first. Once we did that cantilever gate, we're like, we can do it all.
I feel like people feel like that's a bigger step than it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bringing on fabrication inside the company. And once you do that, I think you realize there's a whole host of benefits.
Yeah.
Custom racked gates. Well, to your point, also lead time. Yeah. 3 weeks to get a gate that's wrong, where you could weld one up, and depending on workflow, in a week. Yeah. Or unless you're slammed. But also, one thing we've talked about is it also makes you available to offer gates to others in your area.
Yeah.
You had shared with me previously that there's really no suppliers very close by, 45 minutes to an hour away. So you guys can actually be a resource to your community as well at that point.
Yeah.
Have you guys found that that's the case, that you've been able to reach out to local contractors to try to offer support to them?
We've talked to a few retail-wise. Like I said, we're building inventory. We haven't really activated retail yet, just because it's once you turn that on, it's
you have to commit.
That's
to
one of the risks. It could just it could hurt you.
Yeah.
If you get too much into it and you're not ready for it. So we've slowly built up inventory of pipe and chain link and wood, and kind of playing with some different inventories. But really, we haven't reached out to trying to secure some other people to buy.
Sure.
Solely because our buying capability doesn't bring the price down enough to sell to contractors.
Got it. But have you reached out as far as the custom gates go? I mean, that's something that you might be able to offer.
We've done some for some fellow companies locally.
And I think that's the logical start, right? I think that's the logical start to reach out to contractors, say, hey, listen, we've got this pain point. You probably have a similar pain point. Could we help each other out?
Yeah.
Right. And see where that conversation. Now, unfortunately, so we sell retail wholesale and we fabricate here as well. Unfortunately, there's still some folks that are stuck in the mentality of, well, you and I can't do business because you're my competitor.
Yeah.
We're in the same marketplace. I can't feed my competition, which is kind of bizarre to think about, that if there's enough business for both of us to profitably be in business, the table's big enough for both of us.
I think it's extremely important. We're pretty friendly. Like I said, some of our friends own some other fence companies, and we throw stuff back and forth all the time. Just a couple weeks ago, our residential side slowed down a little bit, and we sub out some of our residential stuff, and I was running short on work for our sub crew. I called them up. I'm like, hey, do you guys have any jobs, just straight labor rate, that we could throw these crews on? And we started swapping jobs back and forth just to keep guys busy. And we transfer materials back all the time, just back and forth. Hey, do you got 3 Ameristar line brackets? Stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that's a great example. That's something that we do here locally in ours is, so for whatever reason, 6 5/8 is kind of the bane of our existence. So we needed some 6 5/8 Cox hinges a few months ago. Didn't have them, but we needed them. We had a retail customer that needed them right then. Failure to plan and all that. We didn't have them. Now, we could have them overnighted, but the cost was going to be extraordinary. So I said, well, let me just reach around. So I just reached out to some contractors, some fencing contractors in the area, and sure enough, one of them said, the weirdest thing, we actually do have some. They came back from a project. We haven't sent them back for credit yet. We've got 4. Do you want them? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then I said, shoot me a price. Whatever your price is on it, I'll pay it. I'm selling them to the customer, and his response was, no, just bring me 2 back. order 2 more from your supplier. When they get in, bring them back. So you talk about trading materials back and forth. Maybe think about that.
Yeah, and we do it so much, and it's not even just a kind of a refill. Sometimes it's, if you need something, call me. If I need something, I'm going to call you. And it's just a mutual, because it helps everybody. Because our suppliers are so, I mean, they're not crazy far, but when you're on a job and you're 2 7/8 brace bands short, there is nothing worse than driving an hour to go buy $4 in bands. Right.
No, that's it. Well, and it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Because they know if they were in that position, you would say, hey, I've got some on the truck.
Yeah.
Right. And it makes the industry stronger as a whole. I really firmly believe that.
Yeah.
Tell me about what the future looks like. Where do you think you guys are headed?
The next 5 years, we really want to, I think the next 2, we really kind of want to stay where we're at, but really, really get efficient with it. Get all the systems in place, because we've been lucky enough to grow pretty quick the last 2 years from where we were. Like, we've been in business for 6 years, but we were growing probably 30-40% a year. And then these last 2 years with just this boom, we started doubling, and you can run into some real issues. And that's kind of where we're at now, where we're still doing good, but there's a lot of headbutting between everybody, between jobs and scheduling. So we really want to kind of finesse that out, and then, slowly get into retail sales. But ideally in 5 years, I'd like to be supply, have a retail division, a full fabricating shop where we're making gates for other companies and selling to the local fence companies around us.
Fantastic. Let me ask you, if you could go back, knowing what you know now, if you could go back and change anything, what would it be?
Books, keeping track of your books. Something that I put off up until probably a year and a half ago. You keep track of it yourself, and you look at your books, like, it's within X amount. At the end of the year, you can get it pretty close, but throughout the year, it's, kind of nonsense. In your head where you're at. But, really getting your numbers down of what your operational expenses are, what those break out to hourly per man. It is priceless. And like I said, we just started about a year and a half ago. We still have our bookkeeper is still going back trying to fix stuff. And it is a hard process to fix if you wait too long to do it.
So it sounds like a piece of advice there would be start as soon as possible. Ironing out your books and your accounting.
Especially these days with all the online stuff, and you can hire virtual book. You're talking $100 a month, $150 a month for a couple hours a week. It's priceless.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's probably peace of mind too. Knowing that, because you're right. Like mentally, you'll know roughly around about where you are. But if you're like me, I've always got that voice in the back of my mind, like, are you sure? You might not be. Have you thought about everything? So it's probably also a little bit of peace of mind of having an independent person look at the books and at least tell you that you're on the right path.
And just hiring the people you need when you need them. Don't try to do all your bookkeeping when you're a fence installer. You're not a bookkeeper. I think the sales guy is one of the biggest people that we overlooked, that didn't think that we needed.
Let me ask you on that vein, what did you look for in that sales professional?
Personality. That was a friend of my wife's, that a friend of hers, her husband. Met him a few times. We just had that real personality to him, just really friendly. You knew he was really good with people. Zero experience in fence, but he came from a moving industry, which is a very rushed, high-paced industry. So, he could keep up with that kind of pressure on him. We had kind of bounced back and forth every once in a while about working for us, what that would look like. And I told him, I was like, if you ever need a job, you're more than welcome to give me a call. We can try it out. 3 days later, after we had that conversation, he had just had a baby that weekend. He got back to, what was it? He had a baby 3 days later. He took 2 weeks off for the baby, or took one. They were given 1 week maternity leave, so he was off for a week with the baby. There were some complications, so he had to take 2 weeks off. He came back from his 2 weeks, and they fired him on the spot. And he called me. He's like, "Hey, is that offer still good?" And we were in a spot where it's still in my head, like, I can't take on a salesman. But I felt obligated. I have kids, and I told him, "We'll do it. I'll figure it out." And that was in January, and we've doubled. We've doubled monthly revenue since bringing him on.
What was the learning process like on his end, as far as, because there's a lot to know when it comes to sales, right? So the current thinking, or maybe the old school thinking, I don't know what you'd say, is that you would bring someone from the installation field into the office to sell because no one knows fence better than they do. But I've been talking to some newer owners who haven't come from that, and they don't know that. So they are bringing in people, like you say, based on personality or skill set, not necessarily out of fencing. Yeah. What was your experience like bringing him on and really introducing him to fence and getting him up to speed on that?
It's a challenge. There's a lot, especially when you do it yourself and you kind of keep everything in your head and you don't document stuff. It's a lot to get that out to somebody, because you don't even know what the question that you need. You don't know what you need to be teaching him until he's in the middle of a chain link quote asking you a question, and you just blurt it out to him because it's just common sense to you, but you don't even know it's a question that you may not know. So it's always just kind of a learning thing. So we make kind of guidelines and books and portfolios of different fencing and diagrams just to help work through that.
Sure.
But it's a never ending. He's only been with us about 8 months now, since January. So it's still a learning curve.
Sure.
But you can't buy personality.
No.
You can train fence, but you can't buy a personality.
That's the thing.
You can't change a personality into something where it just lights up a room, and that's what he does.
Yes. He's very good at that. Absolutely.
Even he makes I'm usually a fairly quiet guy, and he's made me expand and open up more with people.
Nice.
Just having to hold a conversation with him, because he's just always asking you questions and asks the things that you never thought of from a different angle.
I think that's my biggest thought on him, is that he's always interested in knowing more.
Yeah.
You can tell some folks will ask questions just to keep a conversation going. His questions have thought behind them, and you can tell they're leading somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. He's actually wanting to figure out a meaning for something.
Yeah. I think he's one of the most important additions to helping us grow from where we were.
I think that's the step that a lot of people hold back far too long on, is bringing on sales, because typically you see the owner-operator, the process I've seen is they start off as the craftsman, the one building the fence. They'll bring on a few helpers, then they'll step into the office, then they'll sell the jobs. But then they stay in that sales role for years and years, while they're also trying to manage crews and manage jobs and operations and order materials. And they're really kind of becoming the firefighter, right? They're just putting out all these fires constantly. When, to your point, by bringing on a sales professional, someone who their whole job is providing sales for the company, you can see some pretty intense gains, or a trajectory change by bringing on a sales professional.
Yeah, it's really leaning on other people. I couldn't do it without any of our guys.
Sure.
Without our fabricator. Right. I don't have time to fabricate it. I don't have time to. Not that the other guys can't fabricate it. We cross train, so almost all the guys can weld on big projects.
Perfect.
Everybody's in there, but he sees it like I see it. I can tell him what we need to do. No issues.
Nice.
With our field manager, he was my first employee with me by ourselves for probably a year and a half, 2 years.
Sure.
He's seen every single fence we know. There's questions that only he and I can answer.
Sure.
To the guys coming in that don't have fence experience, because I think only one of our guys came in with fencing experience.
Okay.
We've hired a few. It's not always the best way to bring people on.
Yeah. We've had that same experience, because it seems like sometimes you're spending more time fighting bad habits than you are creating new ones.
Yeah.
What does your guys' training process look like? So you bring on someone with little to no experience in fence. What does their first 4 to 6 weeks look like?
It's something that we lack and we need to work on, that we've been trying to learn from kind of watching you guys.
Sure.
Typically, it's sending them with either Jake or Rains and kind of having them work with the A players. That's where we've kind of fallen apart, where I'm pulling those guys out of the field.
Sure.
And the guys in the field are kind of on their own. So we've run into more issues with them, which is great because they're having to learn kind of the hard way, the way we had to learn.
Yeah.
Because we didn't come from fencing.
Right.
Right.
There's something to be said about people learn more acutely from their mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. They'll remember it a little bit better.
It's something we definitely need to work on, I think. And your what do you call your flex day in the week?
Yeah.
It's something we really want to put on because it's really hard when we're scheduling and you're on go. Mine to schedule that time. Because what if we're slow and I don't have time to fill those guys?
Sure.
Training and
great opportunity.
That's where you fit the training in, and it's something that I've just been really bad about. Really allocating time to.
Well, and it's easy to fall out of that because I think it's easy to view it as not revenue driven.
Yeah,
it's not. It doesn't generate revenue today. Now, we can also talk about that increased efficiencies will increase. Maybe not revenue, but profit.
Yeah,
for sure. What do you think? So, what do you think your next few hires look like? Maybe not the exact position, but maybe talk about where maybe the company's headed in the short term.
I think another office person.
Okay.
Is kind of somebody for the phones.
Yeah.
One thing I've also lacked is kind of making a dedicated work phone.
Yeah.
It's it's still my cell phone.
Of course, sure.
It makes you hate your phone. And that's these days, if you miss a phone call and you wait 2 hours to call them back, you lost that job.
Absolutely.
It's gone.
Absolutely.
And that just eats at you.
I was having that conversation the other day with a fencing professional talking about how big of a difference a happy, cheerful voice on the other side of the phone makes.
Yeah.
What you're saying is completely common in the fencing industry, that the owner-operator's phone is the business phone for a lot of years.
Yeah.
But at some point you realize, hey, I need a cheerful, happy voice on the other end of the phone, and I'm not always cheerful and happy.
Yeah. And not always there. That's where
sure. Right.
We did set up a voice over IP system for the shop, and we're not there.
Yeah.
We didn't. So we like somebody that's there at least most of the day.
Sure.
To
during the peak hours.
Because if nobody's answering that, if it's going to voicemail, you lost the job.
Yeah. Right. Well, and there is absolutely an increased amount of frustration lately with people not being able to get in touch with direct people.
Yeah.
Voicemail has always been a thing, right? But it seems like the last year maybe you can hear frustration on the first voicemail.
Yeah.
Right. That the phone wasn't picked up immediately. They're frustrated by not being able to talk to a person the first interaction. Whereas it wasn't like that before. At least I don't remember it being that way before.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little bit more patience in the past, or maybe I'm remembering that with rosy glasses too. It's hard to say, but I think you're absolutely right that there's something to be said when the phone gets picked up within the first 3 rings. A happy, cheerful voice asking, "How can I help?"
Yeah, it's important. Same thing. We drove up. We had some vehicle issues, and we're trying to find parts.
Yeah.
I just sat there scrolling, call, no answer, next, call. Not leaving voicemails, waiting.
Right.
That's just not what we do anymore.
Nope.
If we're looking for a service, we're going to look who's closest. Maybe look at reviews.
Sure.
But you're calling who's closest and who's open.
Are they available?
If they're not answering, you're rolling down that list.
Yep. I couldn't agree more.
If you miss that call by, I think 10 minutes is really your window.
You've already moved on. Right. No, I think that's an excellent point, and I think that's a good pickup. That absolutely needs to be one of the first few hires. Yeah. Is in the beginning, it's hard to justify though, because again, we're talking about a position that doesn't drive revenue.
Yeah.
Now you can talk about it indirectly does, and that's fine. But when we're talking about helpers on a fence crew, they drive revenue.
Yeah.
An extra helper equals extra fence equals extra revenue. Pretty easy math on that. But when we're talking about support staff, fabricators, maybe directly generate some revenue, but not a lot. There's support. They're building the gates for the guys that do revenue. Yeah. The office help, the administrative. It is hard to justify that type of position, but I feel like it's similar to what you said about the sales position, in that once you do, you start seeing some real gains.
Yeah, but it's hard to see that delayed gratification, because every position is pretty much revenue generating.
Yeah,
if done in the right way. A receptionist, you may have that downtime. You got to fill something with the time in between the calls. But
sure.
you fill that time with helping your sales guy schedule, figure out his job walks for the day, lining him out, even going through something we run into, because we do have a big service area that is sometimes a pain.
Sure.
But if you don't map out where your job walks are, poor David is 30 minutes over here and he's got a 40-minute drive over there, but he's supposed to be there in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
All of that stuff, fixing all of that drops your costs, so you're increasing profit margins.
Got it. Yeah.
But it's hard to see that delayed gratification just by bringing somebody on to help with answering the phone.
Yep.
Something you're just not directly related to a sale.
Right. When as a business owner, you say, well, I could do that.
Yeah.
Well, I can answer the phone until you can't.
Yeah.
Right. And until, like you say, you learn to hate the phone call.
Yeah.
That phone call rings and it's for a split second, it's, oh, not again.
Yeah.
And then you pick it up and you handle the business. But I think you're right. I think that's a good next hire would be just basically, if you want to call it administrative help.
Yeah.
So answering phones, but then also helping out with just general administrative tasks, probably.
No, and I like being able to talk to Sarah about your virtual assistant is what it is. It just helps filter those calls, and the ones that need to come to you are coming through.
Yeah,
the rest of them are getting their questions answered by somebody who you've trained to do it.
Yeah,
but it doesn't have to be directly you.
So that's the thing. So we've got a company of virtual assistants that answer the phone, and I say it that way. It's a call center, but the traditional call center, you think of 100 people in a room all quickly answering calls. It's not quite that. We get a virtual assistant that so Shell, who answers our phones right now, is based in Orlando. Well, then her supervisor is in Virginia, and her supervisor is in the Midwest somewhere. But not only do you get that person, you also get a few more steps above it. Now, it does cost more than bringing on one person. So it's always a cost risk reward type thing.
Yeah.
But looking back on your last 6 years of success here, would you attribute that success to luck, or would you attribute it to hard work and dedication?
So I've thought about this a lot, and one day, just watching one of your videos, I muttered under my breath, it's like, luck will bite you in the butt.
Yeah,
and
okay.
I think in business, I don't think there is luck, because if you didn't put in the hard work, the luck will hurt you. Yeah. If you land the big $200,000 job, if you haven't done all of the work prior to that to handle that job, it'll hurt you.
Yeah. I
don't think any of it's luck. It is the putting in all of the hard work to be in a place where an opportunity lands that you're able to handle.
Yeah. I like that. There's this saying, something like luck is you can find luck at the intersection of hard work and dedication.
Yeah.
Or there's all these things that people call it luck, but it was actually a tremendous amount of work to be in the position to take advantage of that opportunity, where you might not have even known it existed had you not put in the hard work and all the time.
Yeah.
I like it. So no such thing as luck, or luck will bite you.
I don't think in business. I think you can win the lottery, you can do a lot of things, but I think in business that there is opportunity. But I don't think it's luck.
Yeah, and it's the same thing to be said for overnight success type thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, he got lucky. Look at that, he grew a lot, and well, okay, but you call us an overnight success if you want, but realize it took 50 some odd years to get here.
Yeah,
right. Like it took a long time to turn into an overnight success. I think you say the same thing about luck.
Yeah,
right. I think luck is an easy way to explain away the unseen hours of work and dedication.
Yep.
Got it. Great answer. I like that a lot.
So I had to get that in there because I thought about all these different sayings and couldn't think of one, and then just one day, like you asked somebody, I was like, man, luck will bite you in the butt. Yeah. And I thought about it, like, it will.
Absolutely.
Luck, if you're not prepared, can put you out of business, depending on what you consider that luck to be, whether it's a massive, big contract or, just anything.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a guy that used to build fence around here. He lucked into like a multi-million-dollar contract at a prison, and and he was talking to my dad about it. He's like, yeah, it's like $1.3 million. He goes, I don't know. He goes, I think we'll be done with it in like 2 months or something. He goes, this is going to be nuts. And I said, well, you better go back and look through it. He said, you missed something. Like, there's no way. You missed something. Nope. Already been all the way through it. I nailed it. Okay. Well, he missed a concrete rat wall around the entire perimeter of the prison. Oh. So it bankrupted him. Yeah. I mean, it was a union job, and there was a lot of stipulations to it as well. And his bid of 1.4 should have been 3.5 or something, or 4 million maybe. I mean, there was a lot to it, and he ended up, like I said, claiming bankruptcy, but it was after like 6 months of just trogging through this thing, trying to get through it. So to your point, he felt like he had lucked into this $1 million contract when that luck bit him squarely in the butt.
Yeah, but we had one. The one that got us was, I think it's still our biggest to the day, but it was a condominium building, and all of their first story units had fencing on them, and every corner had a brick pillar in it. And they wanted to take, there was 57 units. They wanted to take all of the fence out and put Trex in. It was, the biggest job we had ever seen. I think we did about $160,000. All excited about it. We get into it, and I had it booked for 6 or 7 weeks, and it took us 14 weeks.
Is that right?
And luckily, we didn't completely go upside down.
Sure.
The length of it was our first really long job, so we was able to hire on a couple guys. The second crew was that was the first time we got them on.
Okay.
To keep up with the residential on the side.
Sure.
But that crew, all they did was float the loss of that company, or of that big project, because we way underestimated all the tedious detail of it, and it was just a wash at the end, where we just almost completely broke even within, I think I broke it down, went through all of the hours, I think within $700 over 13, 14 weeks.
Incredible.
We're luckily the second crew floated it all through that, and that's all they were doing.
Able to get you guys by.
At the very end, we asked them, "Is like, why did you choose us?" Like, "Oh, you're the cheapest." Like, well, how cheap? Like, yeah, about 30,000 lower. Like,
oh,
yep, that's about what we had in profit in here that we did not get.
Yeah, that feels right. That feels right.
About right. That's you just live and you learn. And
sure.
Sometimes you get bankrupt and you move forward, or sometimes it's.
Well, and that probably goes into also, knowing your numbers well enough to build a cushion in.
Yeah.
Like you said, you'd built a healthy profit into it. So now, unfortunately, it really hurt not to be able to take that profit home.
Yeah.
But it also didn't put you completely upside down, too. Yeah. I think a lot of guys run into danger running really tight margins, and they're doing okay at it, and they're getting a lot of work. But what they don't realize is that next job could be the one that flips upside down and really hurts them.
That has always happened. We're currently working on one that's had delays from numerous issues from county and neighbors, but it was a 3-rail welded horse fence out of drill pipe. Yeah. We'd never done one before. We're pretty good at welding.
Sure.
But you got to saddle all of the pipes to fit in there and weld them in. Just incredibly underbid at the job. And if we didn't know our numbers and we weren't making money off other jobs, it would be a really big deal. But now it's a really expensive learning lesson of what we need, if we do another one, of what we need to bid it at.
Sure.
And you've got to be on top of your number, because it all comes down to those numbers. If you're not making money on the jobs, you're going to get that one job that you messed up, or you tried to expand in luck to get into, and you weren't ready for it.
Right.
And it'll take you out.
Well, I think that's an important note, too, that on the larger projects, we kind of look at it from a different perspective of how could this go wrong? Like, how could this go wrong? How could this really mess up? And how could we go upside down on it? Yeah. And how can we try to minimize that risk? Like, you never know.
Yeah.
It's always the thing you don't expect that really shows up, obviously, but you try to mitigate that risk as much as possible. You can call it a buyout process. You can call it a plan revision. There's different companies have different names for it, but really it's risk mitigation. What's going to go wrong on this? We got the contract. How's it going to go wrong? What can go sideways on us, and how can we try to keep that in check?
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I really do.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate you making the time. Awesome. Guys, let me know in the comments below what you thought about Beau's story. I've met both Beau and his entire team down here. Really great guys. I like it a lot. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Until next time, I'm Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences...
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Until next time, I'm Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors.